Okay, hi everybody. Another book review, and I want to review a book called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. Now, it might sound like it's a book about running. Why would you be interested in a book about running? But like a lot of just good books, this is not a. You don't have to be a runner to enjoy this book. And I did take up running. Took up something called Couch to 5K, which is basically running, and it gets you. It's a BBC app, really good. Takes you from running literally your couch to running 5K. And my sort of the guy that was like kind of like my running guru, a guy called Saj, he said you got to read this book. So I have finally got around to reading it, and I'm glad I did. It's a fantastic book. Really enjoyed it, and let me tell you a bit about what it's about. So this guy Christopher McDougall is a runner, but he has lots of leg injuries. He's got his problems with his knees, his hip. I think he's got plantar fasciitis, shin splints, things like that. And he's getting so pissed off with running that he eventually just wants to give it up. So then he hears about a group of South American Indians called the Tarahumara. And they're people who basically just run. And this is what they do. And they run, and from what he hears about them, they seem to run without having any of these leg injuries, and they literally run in like a pair of sandals, and they have like this strange dress like a dress, and that's what they run in. So they don't have all these fancy shoes, Nike, air support, blah blah blah, all that kind of thing. So he's very kind of intrigued by these people, like, why do these people not have loads of running injuries? And they seem to enjoy what they're doing. They seem to enjoy the running. And he decides to go down to Mexico and track down the Tarahumara. But the other thing about the Tarahumara is they're also quite elusive, because for about 300 or 400 years, they've just been living in caves. They go up, they hide in these caves, and they keep out of the way. And part of the reason why was apparently when the conquistadors went into South America, they just beheaded a lot of them. And so they kind of just became quite reclusive and just stayed in the sort of canyons of Mexico. But one of the things is that they run, and they seem to run and enjoy this. Now, this is kind of proven by at one time when there's a particular town, and this is the thing, this book shifts into different gears. You think you might read a book about running, then you think you might be reading a book about history, then it turns into a bit of science about, why we might have evolved, why we've kind of evolved to run, and also then why we should be running in bare feet. That's the other thing, because the Tarahumara almost run barefoot. Not only do they run barefoot, I mean, sometimes they might wear sandals, but that's about it. And he was kind of looking at this question of why don't they get all these running injuries? So there's a particular town somewhere on the Mexican border, somewhere around there, that has been ravaged by mines being closed down, and one of the guys decides to start up an ultra marathon race, and we're talking 100-mile races, and he thinks that will bring some excitement to the city. And one of the things he does is he recruits some of these Tarahumara runners, and he thinks he's going to get the elite Tarahumara runners. But what happens is like there's this old guy that turns up with two of his nephews, and they come along and they run and they start off, and these Tarahumaras are not even that bothered. They're like last for about the first 30 miles, 40 miles. And then suddenly they just start catching up, and they overtake everybody. And one of the things he says, which I thought was really interesting, is that they have a smile on their face. They're running and they're laughing. So he's like blown away by this, like, what is this? What's going on? And he then goes down this rabbit hole of looking at running without shoes and barefoot running, and that in fact our feet are probably aerodynamically designed to run, and we're designed to run. So then the book goes off into another gear where it talks about why it is that human beings run, and part of the reason it is because we can outrun antelope, gazelle, things like that. Not in short bursts, but we can run longer than them, apparently, because they get knackered. And part of the reason was that human beings would literally run these animals into exhaustion, and then we'd eat them. And that's why we developed all this brain capacity, because we got all this protein. And then we would run as communities almost, which is still kind of like how the Tarahumara run. So, and then he talks about their diet and things like that. And then he tries to follow this character. And this is the other thing, some amazing characters in this book. He follows this guy called Caballo Blanco, who's this elusive character who's a white guy who somehow has immersed himself into the life of the Tarahumara and runs with them. But he can't find this guy. He's like called the White Horse, Caballo Blanco. And he looks for him and finally tracks him down and he's a kind of like wild man almost, but finally tracks him down and gets an interview with him, and they decide to start up this kind of 50-mile run. And then it talks about some of the characters that get involved in the 50-mile run, and the characters are amazing. They're really like interesting, and you know, there's a couple, that hippie couple who are like barely into their 20s, who are out of uni, and they just love running. And then there's this lady that runs who's just, and this is the other thing, this is the one sport. And so then it talks about ultra marathon running. Now, ultra marathon running is the one sport where the men and women compete equally. In fact, the women actually outrun the men sometimes. So it's one of those sports, I mean, we're talking 100-mile runs, they actually do better than the men. So they have this 50-mile run, and there's all these different characters that get involved. And it's a bit like when you watch those movies with those wacky races, and there were all these different characters, and then there's this other ultra marathon runner, and then there's this other guy, you know, the author himself decides to have a go, and then there's 2 or 3 of these Tarahumara runners get persuaded to come in and get involved, and it talks about that, and that is thrilling. So I'm not going to give any spoilers, but that was really interesting and really fun. It was very colourful. So all I'm going to say is, look, this is not a book. It is a book about running, but you don't have to be a runner to enjoy this. And I really enjoyed this. I took this on holiday with me, and to be quite honest with you, I couldn't wait to pick it up. So it was one of those things where, you know, I was like waiting to, you know, I'd finished one chapter and I wanted to know what happened next. Really well written. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't mind at some point in the future rereading this, and I might even give barefoot running a go, because apparently it's good for your feet and it strengthens them. Glasgow might not be the best place because you never know what you might step into, but it's great. It's a well-written book. So thank you, Saj, for recommending this. It's called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. It's got a kind of acknowledgement by Jon Stewart from the Daily Show on the back. You know, but there you go. And it really just makes you think about running and how running is so much more integral to human beings than we maybe even have thought before. Great book. I think, you know, if you're looking for a book to read, and if you're running, this is a good book to read to just give you a bit of inspiration. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. Bye.